Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. What a wonderful event. Thank you all for being here in the afternoon. An extra burden to keep it really interesting. I think this one will be fun. There's a little alert there at the bottom. And if you can read that, this presentation is intentionally AI generated from a human created outline prompt. Continue at your own risk. So one thing that I've found, I've been in Silicon Valley for the last 15 years thinking about cybersecurity in some very interesting roles, is we lean in, and it's terrifying. And so as we're going to talk about opportunities with AI to redefine cybersecurity, I thought what better way to lean in than to leverage it for the creation of the deck itself. So I had an agenda of what I wanted to talk through, and that was part of the prompt that I'll show at the end. And I thought, let's see what AI can spit out. So some of these visuals, some of these layouts, it ignored my prompt and created extra text. So this will be an experience in and of itself. And I think actually that is where the world is going, stepping away from cybersecurity, when everything can be manufactured and faked and impersonated. The human experience will reign supreme. So I think we're going to have a little bit of that here. So over the last many years, I led cybersecurity at Twitter. I was their first CISO. They managed to go public, get to 5,000 people, all before having a CISO. And when I stepped into that role, Mozilla, Firefox, the web browser with, I think at one point, 500 million users. I was responsible for security there, and also chairman of OWASP. So trying to fight the good fight, bringing free and open information on secure coding to the world. So what I'm going to talk about is the experiences I've had there and how they reflect into how I think about investing into cybersecurity and the opportunity we have in front of us. Hopefully it will be interesting to founders, to business owners, the like. So when I think about the challenge that AI presents to us, it's a few different areas. One of them is the adversarial advantage that we get from AI. And I think the Anthropic report that came out, 3 weeks ago, was really compelling. And what was interesting about it was how much the cybersecurity community missed the point. I saw so many pieces of feedback saying, this is dumb marketing material. We already face these threats today. This is nothing new. And the issue there is that they just missed the point. The issue is that it changed the economics. So now, instead of having very advanced adversaries do these attacks manually, we can do them off the shelf. Anyone in the basement can string up these attacks, can launch them. The targets go up. Before, you used to be a mom and pop business and you weren't getting targeted because nobody cared. Now they can easily target you all the time. So I think we have that interesting element on one hand. On the other hand, we have this interesting opportunity, maybe opportunity is the wrong word. We have this interesting reality where because of AI, we can find 0 days faster. And so we see that with what Google's doing to find 0 days. We see an interesting dynamic with Google communicating to open source projects saying we found vulnerabilities in your code through our massive learning models. You should fix them. But what happens when that's weaponized, again, by nation states or as a service on the black market to find vulnerabilities faster? The other challenge that I see is, one, the inability to have explainability in AI. Because it worked a particular way today, will it work that way tomorrow? And I think there are some good points talked about in terms of liability. When the system is tested and works correctly 99 times out of 100, and then we move into one where it doesn't work correctly, how do we prove where that happens? The other 2 points of this that are interesting is bias and data poisoning. And an item that is not getting talked about enough is that the use of AI is essentially offloading the decision-making in your code to the creator of that LLM. And this is something that actually terrifies me. Right now, when we host our code and run it in AWS, we know that it will function, and perhaps AWS or Google Cloud or Azure will go down, but we don't really think about what if the code starts operating differently. Now, when you use an LLM, you're offloading pieces of judgment and decision-making to that LLM. And again, it will work the way you think it works because you tested it, maybe 99 times out of 100. But what about that last time when it starts to move? And what if that way that it moves is that bias that was put into it from the creator, because the creator is a foreign nation state that has an agenda? And so this is an item that I think needs a lot more attention and is not getting discussed enough. Now, in terms of the things that are interesting, when you think about it from an investment and venture angle, the hype cycle, are we in a bubble? Now, in the prices for AI investments as a whole are skyrocketing. The way that you can have quick revenue going up to millions in ARR in just a few months drives up this valuation across the AI as a whole. But I actually feel pretty excited about the valuations within cybersecurity. There are some cases when people will pay up to get into deals, and they do drive the price up. But the reason I'm excited is that I think we're demonstrating actual value with AI and cybersecurity. Now, the other piece that can be a little bit challenging is the, what do you want to say, the magic pixie dust approach. Years ago, I think machine learning was the biggest instance of this. Every vendor would say it is now such and such cybersecurity powered by ML. And then that would drive up prices. And they largely were just doing basic data science in the back end. I do think that at this point, we're actually getting good use of AI inside these cybersecurity companies. Now, in terms of the things that excite me, one thing I'm keeping track of is I used to do training. Sorry, a brief aside. I used to do cybersecurity training, and I would literally talk for 8 hours. And so if I don't keep track of myself, I'll just keep going. Yeah, well, yeah. So the opportunities, here's how I look at AI with cyber. There's two big divides here. There's cyber for AI. How do we think about securing the use of AI inside of enterprises? Are the LLMs up to date? Are the data pipelines secure? How are they actually being used? And I think there's an entire category of work to be done there. And then on the other side, there's AI for cyber. I think that is a very interesting inflection. Take every existing discipline in cybersecurity and ask yourself, if we recreated this today with AI as a core part of how the solution is designed, could we mop the floor on competition? And what's fun about that is you can pick a very boring existing category and you might have a really good shot. Let's take, for example, email security. When you say email security, you're like, oh, how innovative is email security? Email's been around for a long time. We've got Proofpoint and Mimecast. They've been around a long time. Well, one, the attacks are changing dramatically, as others have mentioned. And two, the solutions are not keeping up. So it's a great category to come in and say, we're going to rebuild this with AI at the beginning, at the underpinning, and disrupt the existing competitors. Another one could be data protection on the endpoint. We all want DLP to exist. Data loss prevention is a core component of how we think about security. Don't let data move in the wrong ways. But it's wrought with false positives and human manual work. What if you had AI actually intelligently solve some of these problems? So if you start to look at things that are core principles of security and you find categories that haven't moved in a while, you might have a chance to just really integrate with AI. Now, there's an interesting challenge also that some innovation opportunities with AI are bad business models. So I actually am excited about verticalized AI integration in a few places. And let me give you an example. You may come to a CISO and say, I've built this great piece of technology, it can detect deepfakes. Now, first of all, I'll warn you, if you're trying to sell to a CISO, do not tell them about your amazing technology. And that might sound counterintuitive. They actually don't care. They're going to tell you, why, what problem are you solving for me? And so that's a failure mode I see in a lot of founders. So deepfake detection, it's a very prevalent issue. Deepfakes are terrifying, but as a business, it can become really challenging. So as I think about a founder that has a deepfake solution, I will go into CISO mode and say, well, that's interesting. If I want to protect my business from deepfakes, well, we could have the CFO getting deepfaked. Someone else talked about that. That was a good example. But does that mean I need to have your solution in line in Zoom? But what if we use WebEx? What if it fails over to Google Hangouts? But what if you just can't get a hold of them, they use a FaceTime? So what happens here is you start to think about integrations. And so the reason I mention this is something like deepfake detection can actually be a very interesting business model if you verticalize it. So if you say, we're going to go after the unique problem space in call centers and doing KYC for new applicants into the call center, and we're going to focus on the different use cases that are specific to that workflow. Or maybe we're going to use AI for a legal challenge. But the vertical play can be more compelling than saying you have this amazing solution that doesn't apply horizontally. The other piece of this is boring security problems. Too much of cybersecurity is driven by Hollywood and glitz and glamour and really cool acronyms and this and that. The CISO wants problems to be solved, and many of them are boring. Data, inventory management, for example, access control. These can all be very boring items. I'm going to give you a few more examples. One interesting thing about the deck creation, as I mentioned, I gave it a distinct prompt that said, just list things out, don't add additional text. And it went and it manufactured things. It hallucinated an entire narrative. So if you end up reading this, that's what AI thinks about these topics. So I thought that was interesting, but very good graphics that it created. Now, some of the challenges to address. The reason I mention these is to that point of what's boring can be an amazing business model, and it's a great opportunity to innovate on. So for example, long tail access control management. The issue is access control is a core tenet of security. If you can't figure out who should have access to what and control that as they move through the organization, from being hired, from being reorged, then you have a recipe for disaster. We have these big monolithic centralized systems that we've built everything on, but then we have the explosion of SaaS and long tail use of all these different systems. Nobody can keep straight how you do access control across all of those. It doesn't sound terribly sexy, but it's a great problem to solve. Data security across various mediums. When we put data into LLMs, when it moves from cloud to on-prem to a third party, how do you think about security? And then something as boring as offboarding. We have onboarding systems that give everything that the individual needs, but how do you tear that down when they leave? And again, something that's been around for a long time, vulnerability management. We have CVE scores, and we have thousands of CVEs, but how do you actually prioritize where a business should spend time? And you could do things like tying that to sensitivity of data, to lateral movement, to exposure and attacker points. But these are all things that are great opportunities to tackle, and AI could put us in an interesting position. Skip through that nice AI content. There we go. Now, the last thing that I want to mention in the last couple of minutes here is this notion of bias and risk with LLMs. I hope that we have more of a discussion on how we think about supply chain risk with the creation of LLMs and where the bias may exist. Tony, I think, mentioned it again also on the AI used by solutions of your providers, shadow AI. And I think that's great. We need to be in a reality where everyone has to disclose the origin of their LLMs so you can make the decision if you want to buy this great solution from this country powered by LLMs from this country. And you can start swapping things in there where the answer should be no, but do you even know that right now? And I don't think you do. I think this is a huge issue that needs to be discussed more. There we go. The last thing I'll leave you with in the last few minutes. One, if you're starting a company in cybersecurity, innovation is key, and thinking about how the CISO can adopt that solution is huge. The one failure mode I see often is great technical innovation, but it's going after the CISO problem that's over here. And the reason I do this is CISOs have this many problems, and they have this much time and budget. So this is really the most important thing. Have an amazing, innovative solution, and there's a lot of opportunities, solving a major pain point for the CISO buyer. And then the last thing behind the scenes, all of that interesting imagery, this was the agenda I had. I want to talk about the opportunities, some of the examples, the hypes. I gave it this very clear prompt: do not create additional subtext, et cetera, and we had this whole deck created. So I think it really goes to this leaning into technology and innovation can produce some interesting outcomes, but we should really lean into it and experience it. I created a couple images from Gemini and ChatGPT that I thought I might use. I didn't end up using those. On this element of leaning in, the last thing I'll mention is I've actually started learning about interesting topics by using LLMs to create the material and then process it through and create an audio podcast. And I publish these. So I've published this podcast called the Cyber, because let's just keep, right on the nose. And it's literally, I want to learn more about this topic. So I will have AI gather resources together and then generate two people talking about it and push it through. It's interesting to me and valuable to me, so I mention it in case it's valuable to you. And here is a nondescript QR code that you can scan. And thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Yes.